If someone gave you everything they had for 2 years straight, and then replaced you with a stranger in just 3 days, would you even see it coming? I didn't. So let me walk you through exactly how it happened. Because by the end of this story, you'll understand why I almost didn't believe it myself. This was my first relationship ever. Not my first crush. Not my first almost something. My actual first relationship. And somewhere deep down, I already had this quiet feeling it probably wasn't going to last forever. Call it intuition. Call it low expectations. But even with that feeling sitting there, I never imagined it would end the way it did. Let me back up a little, because the beginning of this story matters more than you'd think. We hadn't just met out of nowhere. We had known each other for years before anything romantic ever started. So when we finally got together, there was no awkward getting to know you phase. We already had that history, that comfort. It felt less like starting something new, and more like finally admitting something that had been there the whole time. For those first few weeks, it was genuinely good. We talked constantly, texting all day and calling at night. The kind of conversations that go on for hours without you noticing the time. We went on walks with no destination, just talking about nothing and everything at once. It was easy. It was comfortable. It felt like the kind of relationship where you finally exhale. Because you're not performing. You're just existing with someone who already knows you. I want you to sit with that feeling for a second. Because this wasn't built on illusions or some fantasy version of a person I barely knew. This was built on years of actual history. And then, one day, without any warning at all, something changed. There was no slow build-up. No fight that escalated into something bigger. One day, she was warm and easy to be around. Then, almost overnight, she became cold. Distant. Harsh in the way she spoke to me. I remember replaying conversations in my head, searching for an explanation. I couldn't find one. She didn't offer one either. It just kept getting worse. Short responses, irritation over things that had never bothered her before. Eventually, it reached a breaking point, and we broke up. I remember feeling completely blindsided. Not just sad, but confused. One day, everything was fine, and the next, it was over. There was no clear reason, just this sudden, unexplained collapse of something that had felt so solid days earlier. For a couple of weeks, we barely talked. I told myself it was probably for the best, that maybe this was just how first relationships go. But then, she reached out. She apologized and told me that during that whole period, she just wasn't in a good mood. That was it. That was the entire explanation for the coldness, the distance, the breakup. And here's where I need to be honest with you, because this is the part where I made my first real mistake. I forgave her. At the time, it made sense to me. We had years of history together. I cared about her. And when someone you've known that long looks you in the eye and says she just wasn't in a good place, you want to believe that's the full truth. So we got back together, and for a while, things genuinely were good again. We slipped right back into that same comfortable rhythm like nothing had happened. That same month was her birthday. Money was tight for me, but I scraped together what I had and bought her a small gift. Nothing expensive, just something that came from genuinely wanting to make her smile. She seemed happy with it. I started to let my guard down again. I almost completely forgot about the first breakup. Almost. Because then it happened again. Same pattern. No warning signs I could identify. One day, she was simply cold and distant again. The same shift I had seen before, except this time, part of me recognized it immediately. I tried to talk to her about it. Tried to understand what had changed, but I got nowhere. Within days, just like before, ended again. Second breakup. Same lack of explanation. Same confusion left in the silence. This time I sat with it differently. Is this just who she is? Is this how she processes things? By pulling away completely and explaining it later as nothing more than a mood? A few weeks passed, and then, almost like clockwork, she came back again. Third time. I remember the internal conflict before I responded, because even I could recognize the pattern by then. 2 breakups, 2 vague explanations, 2 returns, and here we were, standing at the exact same door, except this time, already knew the price of walking through it. I said yes anyway. I forgave her again. And what happened during this third chapter ended up being the most important part of this entire story. Because this time, things didn't just go back to normal. This time, things got better than they had ever been before, which is exactly why what happened next hit so much harder than anything before it. But I'll leave things there for now, because what happened during this third attempt, the moment that shattered everything I thought I understood. About her, about us, about 2 years of history between two people, deserves its own space. If you watched part 1, you know, we had broken up twice, and gotten back together twice. You'd think after that much history, I would have known better than to walk through that door a third time. But I did. And what happened during that third chapter is something I still think about constantly. Because it's the part that changed everything. Let's pick up where we left off. Third time getting back together. And this time felt different in a good way. I thought we'd just slip back into that same familiar, slightly cautious rhythm. Instead, it felt like we had genuinely turned a corner. We were hanging out more than we had in a while, talking the way we used to before any of the breakups. There was a lightness to it that had been missing during the previous 2 attempts. I remember actually feeling hopeful. Maybe this was the version of us that was going to last. Hold on to that feeling, because it matters for what comes next. Around this time, something happened in my own life that had nothing to do with her. I won't get into the specifics, but everything seemed to hit me at once. Stress from multiple directions, exhaustion that went beyond just being tired. I was mentally drained in a way I hadn't experienced before. So I made a decision. I decided not to tell her how I was actually feeling. I know how that might sound, but you have to understand my reasoning. She had her own problems, plenty of them. The last thing I wanted to do was add my struggles on top of everything she was already carrying. I genuinely thought I was protecting her by staying quiet. So when she reached out that day, I didn't explain what was going on inside my head. I simply told her I was tired and going to get some sleep. That's it. That's the entire message. No attitude behind it. No hidden meaning. Just an exhausted person telling his girlfriend he needed rest. She got offended. I figured maybe she was a little disappointed we couldn't talk longer, and that it would blow over the way small friction usually does. I genuinely didn't think much of it. But what she did next, I never saw coming. She sent a voice message, not to me, to one of my close friends. In it, she said I was the worst person she had ever met in her life, that she wished she had never known me. She kept going, painting me as someone cruel, someone toxic. All of this, stemming from a single message that said, "I'm tired, I'm going to sleep." I remember finding out about that message and just sitting there in disbelief. The punishment didn't match the crime. There was no crime. There was a tired person who said he needed rest. I want you to think about the context here, because this is what made it so hard to process. We had known each other for 2 years at that point. 2 years where I had been there for her through real, hard things. I had supported her consistently, putting her needs ahead of my own more times than I could count. And after one tired, drained night where I said I needed to sleep instead of talking, I became, in her own words, the worst person she had ever met. That sentence still doesn't sit right with me. Not because I'm holding on to anger, but because of how disconnected it felt from everything that had actually happened between us. After that voice message got back to me, there was no real conversation about it. No confrontation. No moment where she walked back what she'd said. It just sat there, an unspoken tension neither of us addressed. And then, not long after, she left for a camp. I remember her telling me about it beforehand. Just a trip she had planned. I didn't think much of it. I figured we'd keep talking while she was away, the way we usually did. I had no idea that trip was about to become the final piece of this entire story. Because while she was at that camp, she met someone, a guy, and within that short window of time, something started between them, something that, by the time she came back, had already turned into an actual relationship. I remember the exact moment I found out, exactly where I was standing, exactly what I felt in my chest. That specific kind of disbelief that doesn't even register as pain yet, it just sits there, frozen, while your mind tries to catch up. 2 years of history, 3 separate breakups and reconciliations, countless moments of support, patience, and forgiveness on my part. And she had replaced all of that, replaced me in the span of 3 days at a camp. I want to pause here, because what I found out next about exactly how that happened, and what it felt like to process being replaced that quickly, is where the story takes its hardest turn yet. In the last part, I told you, she went to a camp and met someone else there. By the time she came back, she already had a new boyfriend. 2 years of history, replaced in 3 days. In this final part, I want to walk you through how that felt to process, what I did afterward, and the question I'm still sitting with today, because I think a lot of you watching this might be sitting with the exact same question in your own lives. When I first found out, it didn't feel real. I genuinely mean my brain struggled to process the timeline of it. 3 days. That's how long it took for someone else to step into a space I had spent 2 years building. I kept doing the math in my head. 2 years of knowing each other before we even started dating. 5 months of an actual relationship. 3 separate breakups and reconciliations, each one requiring me to choose, again and again, to trust her and believe that this time would be different. And on the other side of that math, 3 days. That's all it took for someone else. I think what hurt the most wasn't even the new relationship itself. People move on, that's just life. What hurt was the speed of it. Because when something takes 3 days to happen, it forces you to ask an uncomfortable question. Was any of it ever as deep as I thought it was on her end? I don't have a definitive answer to that. I can't see inside someone else's mind, but the speed left a mark on me regardless. It made me question the entire foundation of those 5 months, and honestly, even some of the years before that. I missed her. I want to be honest about that, because pretending I moved on instantly would make this whole story pointless. There were nights after finding out where it genuinely broke me down. Not just sadness in the abstract sense, but real tears that caught me off guard in the middle of doing something completely unrelated. I think that's one of the strange things about heartbreak. People don't talk about enough. The length of a relationship doesn't always match the size of the hole it leaves behind. 5 months doesn't sound like a long time on paper, but add 2 years of prior history, add 3 rounds of breaking up and choosing to come back anyway, and the emotional investment ends up running a lot deeper than the calendar would suggest. So, yes, I missed her. And yes, there were moments it got to me more than I expected. But slowly, over time, I started letting it go. I wish I could tell you there was one big turning point where the pain just disappeared. That's not how it worked. It was slower and quieter than that. Just small moments where I noticed I wasn't thinking about her as much. Days where I caught myself laughing and realized it was the first genuine laugh in a while. Looking back now, I can honestly say I feel a lot better than I did right after everything happened. Not unaffected, but genuinely lighter. Here's where I land now. About a month after everything ended, I told myself, almost immediately after the breakup, that I wasn't going to jump into another relationship anytime soon. It felt like the responsible decision. Take time, heal properly. Don't repeat the same mistakes before I've even processed what happened. But if I'm being fully honest, part of me wonders if that's actually the wrong call. Because here's the thing that keeps nagging at me. Before her, I had already been turned down by 7 different girls. 7. So when I think about putting myself back out there eventually, I can't help but wonder what's actually going to be different next time. What guarantees the next attempt won't end the same way, or won't even get off the ground at all? Maybe there isn't a guarantee. Maybe that's just the nature of putting yourself out there. There's no version of this where someone promises you ahead of time that it'll work out. You just decide if you're willing to risk it again anyway. For now, I think I needed this time. Time to actually sit with what happened instead of rushing past it. In time to figure out what I actually want instead of reacting out of loneliness. If you've been through something similar, where you gave everything to someone and forgave more times than you probably should have, and still ended up replaced like none of it mattered, you're not alone in that feeling. It's a specific kind of pain. The kind that makes you question your own judgment and your own worth. But it doesn't mean you did anything wrong by caring that much. It just means you cared about someone who couldn't match that effort in the end. And if you're sitting there right now, wondering whether to give your time and trust to someone new, or to keep waiting until you feel completely ready, I'd genuinely like to know what you would do in my position. Because honestly, I'm still trying to figure that part out myself.